Sarah woke up as always before dawn. The faint sunlight was beginning to illuminate the sky, tinting it a deep blue, while she breathed deeply, trying to dispel the ghosts of the previous night. The house, modest and worn by time, seemed to reflect what remained of her life, stagnant, imprisoned in the shadows of a past marked by humiliation and fear. Her fingers traced the rough sheets as she listened to the distant birdsong. It was the only moment of peace she could find on that isolated ranch in rural Kentucky. Soon Frank would wake up, and with him all the oppression that had already lasted 15 years. Another day, she whispered to herself, rising carefully to avoid making noise. In the kitchen, she prepared the coffee as she did every morning. Her movements were mechanical, rehearsed through years of routine. The strong aroma invaded the space, bringing a little comfort to her restless heart. Through the window she observed Thunder, the black horse grazing peacefully in the field. "At least you have peace, my friend," she murmured, feeling a pang of envy for the free animal. Frank appeared in the kitchen doorway, his eyes still swollen. With sleep, his face marked by time and the previous night's alcohol. "The coffee's weak again," he complained after the first sip. Sarah merely nodded, without energy to argue. At 38, she had already learned that silence was her best defense. Frank continued complaining, as he did every day, about the food, the cleanliness of the house, the work that didn't yield enough, the bills that didn't add up. "I'm going into town today," he announced, finishing his coffee. "Need to sort out some business at the bank. I don't want any visitors here while I'm gone, understand?" "Yes, Frank," she responded automatically. When she was finally alone, Sarah felt the weight on her shoulders diminish. She walked to the stable where Thunder greeted her with a soft neigh. There, away from her husband's watchful eyes, she could be a little more herself. "One day, my friend, one day we'll be free," she whispered into the animal's ear, caressing his dark mane. It was while tending to the stable that afternoon that something caught her attention. Between the boards at the back, almost invisible to inattentive eyes, was a folded paper yellowed by time. Intrigued, Sarah carefully picked it up. It was a handwritten letter, with delicate calligraphy. "If you found this letter, perhaps you need help as I once did. My name is Linda, and like you, I lived trapped in a marriage that slowly destroyed me. If you wish to be free, don't wait. The path is before your eyes. You just need to make the decision. Look for Linda's house in the city. There you'll find shelter and people willing to help." Sarah's heart accelerated. Her hands trembled as she reread the words, feeling a strange sensation she hadn't experienced in a long time. Hope. The letter had no date, but something told her this message had reached her at the exact moment she needed it. She carefully folded the paper and hid it in her apron pocket. The possibility of an escape, of a life away from that ranch, from Frank and his abuse, made her entire body vibrate with new energy. But fear soon came, like a shadow, covering the rays of hope that had sprouted. How to escape? Where to go? Without money, without friends, without family. The questions hammered in her head. The sound of a car approaching awakened her from her thoughts. It wasn't Frank. It was too early for him to return from town. She quickly put away the cleaning supplies and ran to see who was arriving. A modest car parked in front of the house. A middle-aged woman with graying hair and a serene face got out of the vehicle. She carried a folder and an air of determination. "Good afternoon. My name is Connie. I'm a social worker. I'm doing work with families in the region. Do you have a minute?" Sarah hesitated, remembering Frank's order not to receive anyone, but something in the kind eyes of this woman made her reconsider. "I don't know if I can. My husband—" "I understand," Connie smiled comprehensively. "We can just talk right here on the porch. I won't take much of your time." Without knowing why, Sarah nodded. That seemingly casual encounter would change her life forever. Connie wasn't just any social worker. Her 30 years of profession had given her a keen eye for detecting suffering hidden between the lines, in contained gestures, in lowered gazes. As Sarah served a simple coffee on the worn porch, Connie observed her every movement, every hesitation, every furtive glance toward the road. like someone who fears someone's arrival. "How long have you and your husband lived on this ranch?" asked Connie, trying to appear casual. 15 years, responded Sarah, sitting on the edge of the chair as if ready to get up at any moment. "We came here right after our wedding." "And do you like it here? Life in the country?" A heavy silence hung between them. Sarah stared at the horizon, where the sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in orange tones. "You get used to everything in this life, don't you?" The evasive response didn't go unnoticed by Connie. The social worker opened her folder and pretended to consult some documents, giving Sarah time to feel more comfortable. "You know, Sarah, sometimes our work goes beyond filling out forms. We're here to help people find paths when they feel lost." Something in those words touched Sarah deeply. Her eyes met Connie's, and for an instant an invisible connection was established between them. It was as if the social worker could see through her, see the invisible scars she carried. "I don't know what you're talking about," said Sarah, averting her gaze. Connie smiled gently and took a card from her folder. "This is my number. If you ever need to talk about anything, I'm available. Sometimes we just need someone to listen without judging." Sarah took the card with trembling hands and quickly hid it in her apron pocket, along with Linda's letter. At that moment, a strong neigh came from the stable, drawing the attention of both women. "Is that your horse?" asked Connie. "Yes, Thunder, he's my only friend here," confessed Sarah, allowing herself a moment of vulnerability. "May I meet him?" Without waiting for an answer, Connie stood up and walked toward the stable. Sarah followed, apprehensive. Thunder, normally skittish with strangers, surprisingly approached the social worker, allowing her to caress his muzzle. "He trusts you," observed Connie. "Animals have a sixth sense for people. They see beyond appearances." "Thunder understands me like no one else," said Sarah, with affection in her voice that she hadn't shown until then. "Sometimes I think he knows what I'm feeling before I even realize it." Connie observed the interaction between the two with interest. Animals can be great allies in difficult times. They give us strength when we think we have none left. The sound of a car approaching made Sarah freeze, her eyes widened in panic. "It's Frank, he can't find you here," she whispered, terrified. "All right, I'm leaving." "Remember my card," responded Connie, staying calm. "And Sarah, you're not alone." The social worker quickly left through the side of the stable, going around the house to reach her car without being seen. Sarah ran to the kitchen, trying to appear normal when the door opened violently. Frank entered, carrying shopping bags and a strong smell of alcohol. "Who was here?" he asked, his eyes narrowed with suspicion. "Nobody," answered Sarah, avoiding his gaze. "I was in the stable taking care of Thunder." Frank dropped the bags on the table and approached dangerously, invading her personal space. "Don't lie to me. I saw a car leaving the ranch road. Must have been some lost salesperson. Nobody stopped here," she insisted, praying he would believe her. For a tense moment, Frank stared at her as if trying to extract the truth from her eyes. Finally, he seemed to accept her explanation. "Put away these groceries and prepare dinner. I'm hungry." As Frank moved away to the bedroom, Sarah felt the weight of Connie's card and Linda's letter in her pocket. Two unknown women had planted seeds of hope in her heart that day. For the first time in years, she felt that there might be a way out. In swarm. The solitude of the kitchen, she allowed herself a small smile. Connie's eyes had seen beyond the facade she had so carefully constructed. They felt her pain, recognized her suffering. And more importantly, they offered help. As she prepared dinner, Sarah made her decision. She didn't know how or when, but she would find a way to leave that ranch, that life of oppression. Linda's letter and Connie's card were more than pieces of paper. They were maps to the freedom she so longed for. 3 days passed since Connie's visit. 3 days in which Sarah felt the weight of the card in her pocket, like an incandescent ember. Every time she was alone, she reread Linda's letter and looked at Connie's phone number, debating internally between fear and hope. Thursday morning dawned with a fine rain that blurred the contours of the ranch. Frank had left earlier to resolve problems with the cattle and wouldn't return until night. Sarah felt that familiar sensation of temporary freedom, those brief moments when she could breathe without feeling the weight of her husband's watchful gaze. In the stable, Thunder was restless, neighing and stomping his hooves on the packed earth floor. "What is it, my friend?" asked Sarah, caressing his mane wet from the rain. "Do you feel that something is about to change too?" She looked at the grey sky, gathering courage. If she wanted to change her life, she needed to act. With trembling hands, she took the old kitchen telephone and dialed Connie's number. "Hello?" The serene voice of the social worker sounded from the other end. "Connie, it's Sarah from the ranch." A brief silence, and then, "Sarah, it's good to hear your voice. How are you?" The simple question, asked with genuine concern, was enough for tears, contained for so long to begin, flowing down Sarah's face. "I'm not well, Connie. I haven't been well for 15 years. And so, like a dam that finally breaks, Sarah began to speak. She told about the beginning of the marriage, when Frank was still gentle and affectionate. She spoke about how, little by little, he transformed, becoming controlling, manipulative. She narrated the years of isolation, the constant humiliations, the fear that had become her daily companion. "I found a letter," she said finally, "from a woman named Linda. She mentions a house, a shelter for women like me." "Linda's house," confirmed Connie with a tone that mixed surprise and recognition. "I know it well. It's a safe refuge for women who need to start over." Do you think they would accept me there?" "I'm sure they would. But Sarah, we need to plan carefully. Men like Frank don't easily accept losing control." They arranged to meet the next day during the town fair. Frank never went to the fair, considering it women's stuff. It would be the perfect opportunity to talk in person, away from the eyes and ears of the ranch. Upon hanging up the phone, Sarah felt a mixture of terror and excitement. Was she really considering running away, abandoning everything she knew, even if that everything was a prison of suffering? The fear of the unknown fought against the fear of continuing to live that non-life. "What should I do, Thunder?" she asked the horse, who observed her with his dark, intelligent eyes. In response, the animal neighed softly, pushing his muzzle against her shoulder, as if encouraging her. The next morning, Sarah woke before dawn, as always. She prepared Frank's coffee, left lunch ready, and mentioned casually that she needed to go to town to buy some provisions that were running low. "Don't be long," was all he said, without raising his eyes from the newspaper. In town, the bustle of the weekly fair was comforting. People talking, laughing, negotiating, real life pulsating, something that seemed so distant from her existence on the ranch. Sarah walked among the stalls, following Connie's instructions, until she reached a small cafe on the corner of the square. The social worker was already there, seated at a table in the back, partially hidden by an ornamental plant. Upon seeing Sarah, she smiled and made a discreet gesture for her to join. "I brought something for you," said Connie as soon as Sarah sat down. It was a small envelope. Inside there was money and a paper with an address. "What is this?" "An exit ticket. The address is for Linda's house in Louisville. The money is for the bus ticket and the first few days until we can organize everything." Sarah looked at the envelope, feeling its symbolic weight. "I can't accept—" "Yes, you can," interrupted Connie firmly. "It's not charity, Sarah. It's solidarity. One day when you're back on your feet, you'll do the same for another woman." A silent tear ran down Sarah's face. "What if he finds me? What if he comes after me? Linda's house is a safe place with legal protection. Besides," Connie hesitated briefly, "there's something you need to know about me." The social worker took a deep breath, as if about to reveal a secret kept for a long time. "My real name is Linda Connie. I was the one who wrote that letter more than 10 years ago before I managed to escape from my own nightmare." Sarah felt the world spin around her. The coincidence was too absurd to be true. But how? Why? "Because some stories need to repeat themselves to have a different ending," responded Linda, taking Sarah's hands in hers. "And I promise. You, Sarah, your story will have a different ending." The return to the ranch was different. Sarah observed the landscape through the bus window with new eyes. The same trees, the same fences, the same fields that before seemed to imprison her, Horizon were now just temporary obstacles. In her pocket, the envelope with the money and the address of Linda's house weighed like a promise. Connie's revelation, or rather, Linda Connie's, still echoed in her mind. The coincidence was too surreal to be just a work of chance. How had that letter reached the barn of her ranch? Why had she specifically found it? As she got off at the dirt road leading to the property, Sarah walked slowly, reorganizing her thoughts. She needed to act naturally. Frank couldn't suspect anything. The house was silent when she arrived. She left the groceries in the kitchen and went straight to the stable. Thunder greeted her with a neigh, as if sensing her inner agitation. "Things are going to change, my friend," she whispered, embracing the animal's neck. "I'll find a way to take you with me, I promise." While brushing Thunder's mane, she heard a noise coming from the back of the barn. It was Frank rummaging through old boxes. Quickly, Sarah hid behind one of the wooden pillars. "She can't find out," Frank muttered to himself as he opened a dusty box. "Never." Curious, Sarah watched him remove a package wrapped in cloth from the box. Carefully, he opened the wrapping, revealing what appeared to be an old diary and some yellowed photographs. His face, normally hard and impassive, now showed an expression that Sarah had never seen before: vulnerability. Frank quickly flipped through the diary, stopping at some pages, reading passages in silence. Then he put everything away again, with the same care, and left the barn through the back door without noticing Sarah's presence. As soon as her husband moved away, she ran to the box. It was locked. The key was probably with Frank. Frustrated, Sarah returned to the house, her mind buzzing with questions. What secrets was Frank hiding in that diary? Why did he guard it with such care? And more importantly, how could it affect her? Already back from town? Frank's voice surprised her when she entered the kitchen. "Yes, just got back," she answered, trying to control the tremor in her voice. "I bought everything we needed." Frank observed her for a moment, as if trying to decipher something in her face. "Meet anyone you know there?" Sarah's heart accelerated. Did he know about Linda? No, no one. Just did the shopping and came back. He seemed to accept the answer, but Sarah noticed that something was different. Frank seemed as worried, not about her, but about something that deeply disturbed him. "I'm going to town tomorrow," he announced suddenly. "I have business to take care of. I'll only be back on the weekend." Sarah felt a wave of relief and hope. 3 days without Frank. It would be the perfect opportunity to plan her escape, or perhaps discover what he was hiding so carefully. That night, while Frank slept, Sarah discreetly searched the pockets of his pants, looking for the key to the box. She found nothing. Frustrated, she returned to bed, pretending to sleep when he moved. The next morning, Frank left early. Sarah waited until the car disappeared around the bend in the road to run to the phone. She dialed Linda's number with trembling fingers. "He's going to be gone for 3 days," she said as soon as the social worker answered. "It's our chance." "Perfect," responded Linda. "I'll come over this afternoon. Prepare only the essentials." "And Sarah, are you sure no one knows about your plans?" "Absolutely, but there's something strange happening. I found Frank hiding a diary in the barn. It seemed important, something he doesn't want me to discover." A heavy silence established itself on the line. "Linda, are you there?" "I am." Her voice sounded strangely tense. "Sarah, can you describe this diary?" "It was old, with a brown leather cover. There were some photographs with it. Why? Do you know something about this?" Another silence, longer this time. "I'm not sure, but—" Linda hesitated. 15 years ago, before fleeing from my husband, I wrote everything I suffered in a diary. It was my way of surviving. When I finally left home, I left it behind. It was too dangerous to carry with me." Sarah felt a shiver run down her spine. "Are you suggesting that—" "I don't want to jump to conclusions, but has Frank ever mentioned knowing someone named Edward?" The name hit Sarah like lightning. Edward was Frank's older brother, deceased years before she met her husband. According to Frank, Edward had died young in a car accident. Edward was Frank's brother. He never talked much about him. Linda's breathing became audible on the other end of the line. "Edward Mendoza was my ex-husband's name." A terrible truth. began to unveil itself before Sarah. The coincidences were too many to be ignored. "Are you saying that—" "I'll be there in 2 hours," interrupted Linda, her voice now firm and determined. "Don't touch anything until I arrive. And Sarah, be careful. The walls of that ranch hold more secrets than we imagine." If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give it a like. Tell us which city you're watching from. We continue. Time seemed to drag while Sarah waited for Linda. Every noise startled her. Every shadow seemed to contain a threat. The revelation about Edward had awakened an avalanche of doubts and suspicions. If Edward was Linda's ex-husband, what did that mean about Frank? What did it mean exactly? That he knew about his sister-in-law's past, that he had hidden the true story of his brother all these years, and more importantly, why had he chosen Sarah as his wife? Unable to stay still, she decided to return to the barn. She needed to find a way to open that box. The key might be elsewhere, perhaps in Frank's office. She headed to the small room her husband used to keep the ranch documents. The office was a reflection of Frank's personality. Austere, obsessively organized, with no room for sentimentality. Meticulously labeled drawers, folders aligned in alphabetical order. Sarah began to search carefully, to leave no traces of her quest. It was in the third drawer that she found something interesting. Not the key, but a folder simply marked Edward. With trembling hands, she opened it. Inside, she found legal documents, certificates, and an old photograph. In the image, 2 young men smiled at the camera. Frank, perhaps in his early 20s, and beside him, a man who greatly resembled him but with softer, gentler features. Edward. Behind them, almost hidden in the shadows, was a young woman. The face was difficult to distinguish, but something about her was vaguely familiar. Turning the photograph over, Sarah read the pencil inscription. Edward, Frank, and Linda, Mendoza Ranch, 1998. The shock almost made her drop the photo. So, it was true. Linda had been married to Edward, Frank's brother. But what had happened, and how had Frank ended up finding Sarah years later? The noise of a car approaching pulled her from her thoughts. Quickly, she put the photo back in the folder and replaced everything where it was. She ran to the window. It was Linda arriving. "I found a photograph," said Sarah, as soon as she opened the door for the social worker. "You, Edward, and Frank at the ranch." Linda entered, her face showing a mixture of emotions. "I suspected something like this might exist. Sarah, we need to talk. There are things you need to know." They sat in the living room, the tension palpable between them. Linda took a deep breath before beginning. "Edward and I married very young. He seemed like the perfect man at first, caring, attentive, romantic. We moved to this ranch which belonged to his parents. Frank lived in the house next door, the one that's now abandoned." Sarah nodded. The small ruined house, a few meters away, had always intrigued her. Frank had never allowed her to approach the place. With time, Edward changed. He became controlling, violent. Frank knew, witnessed it several times, but never interfered. He said they were couple problems, that I should try harder to please his brother. Linda paused as if gathering strength to continue. One night, Edward crossed the line. I ended up in the hospital. While I was hospitalized, I made my decision. I would flee as soon as I was discharged. I wrote everything in my diary as a form of testimony in case something happened to me. When I left the hospital, I returned to the ranch only to get some belongings. Edward wasn't there. Frank was. Her voice faltered momentarily. He tried to stop me. Said I was being ungrateful. That Edward gave me everything, that I wouldn't survive out there alone. I managed to escape, but I had to leave many things behind, including the diary. I hid it in the barn, thinking I'd come back for it when it was safe. But you never came back, completed Sarah. I never came back. I started a new life, changed my name, became a social worker to help other women. Years later, I heard that Edward had died, but I never imagined that Frank would continue his brother's legacy, concluded Sarah, a chill running down her spine. A strong neigh came from the stable, as if thunder sensed the tension in the chassis. Frank found my diary. He read everything I wrote about Edward's abuse, and instead of feeling shame or remorse, he Linda couldn't complete the sentence. "He looked for someone like me," said Sarah, understanding falling on her like a weight. "Someone vulnerable, without family, whom he could control completely. Someone who had never heard of Edward or you." Linda nodded, silent tears flowing down her face. "When I saw the ad in the newspaper offering a job to a young woman at the Mendoza Ranch, something told me I needed to investigate, but it took me years to find the courage to return to this place, and when I finally came as a social worker, I found you. And the letter, how did it get to the barn?" "I wrote several copies back then. I left them in strategic places, hoping other women would find them. I never imagined one of them would reach you so many years later." A heavy silence established itself between them, each absorbing the implications of that revelation. "Linda, we need to go now. Frank could return at any moment, and if he discovers I've been here—" "Not without the diary," affirmed Sarah, with a determination that surprised them both. "We need to find the key to that box. The complete truth is in there, I'm sure. The truth is before us. Frank is as abusive as Edward was, and if we stay here, your fate will be the same as mine almost was." "No," insisted Sarah. "There's something more. Frank is hiding something that even you don't know, and I can't leave without discovering what it is." The eye. Afternoon was advancing when Sarah and Linda walked determinedly toward the barn. The sky, previously blue, was beginning to be covered with grey clouds that announced a storm. A harbinger of what was to come, thought Sarah. "The box is at the back, hidden under the floorboards," she explained, guiding Linda between the hay bales and agricultural tools. Thunder observed the two with unusual attention, as if understanding the importance of that moment. When they reached the indicated spot, Sarah moved away an old rug, revealing loose boards in the floor. "Frank hides it here. I need to find the key." Linda examined the hiding place with experienced eyes. "We don't need a key," she said, removing a hairpin. "I learned some useful things during my escape." With surprising skill, she inserted the hairpin into the lock of the wooden box. After a few moments of concentration, a click was heard. The lid opened. Inside, besides the diary that Frank had been reading, there was a variety of objects: old letters, photographs, newspaper clippings yellowed by time, and a small accounting book. Linda picked up her diary with trembling hands. 15 years, she murmured, caressing the worn cover. "I thought I'd never see it again." While Linda leafed through her past, Sarah examined the other items. The newspaper clippings caught her attention. They were all about the same subject: the disappearance of a young woman named Claire Miller, which occurred in 1999. "Do you know this girl?" she asked, showing the clippings to Linda. The social worker's expression changed instantly. "Claire," she whispered, her face as pale as if she had seen a ghost. "She worked at the neighboring farm. We were friends. She disappeared shortly after I fled. The newspapers say she simply vanished. No one ever found her. Frank kept all these clippings, one is why." Sarah continued rummaging through the box and found the small accounting book. Upon opening it, she found no numbers or financial records, but dates and names. Her kind of personal diary of Frank's. The notes were cryptic: CM, problem solved. E doesn't suspect. L still in the city. "L, could that be you?" asked Sarah, showing the notes. Linda examined the book, her expression increasingly disturbed. "And CM would be Claire Miller," she concluded, her voice almost failing. "Sarah, this is worse than I imagined. Frank not only knew about Edward's abuse, he might be involved in Claire's disappearance." A distant thunderclap broke the silence, followed by the sound of rain beginning to fall on the barn roof. Thunder neighed restless. "We need to leave." "Now," said Linda, storing her diary and the clippings in her bag. "This is too dangerous." Sarah agreed, but before closing the box, something else caught her attention: a small silver key, different from the one that opened the box. It was wrapped in a piece of cloth with the initials CM embroidered. "This isn't the key to the box," she observed, showing it to Linda. What could it be for? A flash of understanding crossed the social worker's face. "The abandoned house," she whispered. "The house where Edward and I lived, where Frank lives now." "The ruined house?" asked Sarah, confused. "But Frank never lets anyone approach." Exactly. What could he be hiding there? The rain intensified, transforming into a real storm. The noise of water on the zinc roof created a sound curtain that isolated the barn from the rest of the world. It was now or never. "Let's go," decided Sarah, keeping the key in her pocket. They left the barn, facing the torrential rain. The small abandoned house just 200 meters away was almost invisible through the curtains of water falling from the sky. They ran, protecting themselves as best they could, until they reached the deteriorated porch of the building. The main door was locked with a padlock and nailed boards. They went around the house, looking for another entrance. At the back, they found a small side door, less protected. The key fit perfectly in the rusty lock. The interior was dusty and dark, furniture covered with sheets, cobwebs in the corners, the smell of mold and abandonment. Linda looked around with an expression of pain and nostalgia. "So many memories," and she murmured. "Some good, most terrible." Sarah turned on her phone's flashlight, illuminating the way. The house seemed frozen in time, as if it had been abandoned in a hurry. "What exactly are we looking for?" she asked. "I don't know. Something that explains why Frank keeps the key to this place, along with those clippings about Claire." They searched through the main rooms without finding anything but dust and memories. It was in the master bedroom that Linda suddenly stopped, her eyes fixed on the floor. "The floorboards are different here," she observed, pointing to an area where the boards looked newer than the others. "It wasn't like this when I lived here." Sarah approached, illuminating the spot with her flashlight. Indeed, a section of the floor, approximately 1 square meter, seemed to have been replaced. The boards weren't perfectly aligned with the old ones. "Help me move this dresser," asked Linda. With effort, they moved the heavy piece of furniture, completely revealing the suspicious area. Using an iron bar found in the corner of the room, Sarah managed to lift one of the boards. Others came loose easily, revealing a small compartment under the floorboards. The beam of the flashlight illuminated something that made both hold their breath, a sealed metal box, similar to a safe, and beside it, a small jewelry box with the initials CM engraved on the lid. "Claire," whispered Linda, her voice choked with emotion. Before they could open either of the objects, they heard a sound that froze the blood in their veins, the noise of a car approaching on the ranch road. Frank was returning. "It's Frank," whispered Sarah. Terror stamped on her face. He was supposed to be gone for 3 days. "The storm must have made him return early," concluded Linda, quickly grabbing Claire's box and some letters that were with it. "We don't have time for anything else. We need to get out of here." They tried to replace the floorboards, but the rush made the task impossible. The sound of the car was getting closer and closer. "Through the back door," decided Sarah. "We can go around the house and go straight to my car without him seeing us." The rain continued mercilessly when they left through the side door. Visibility was almost zero, which could be an advantage or a trap. Crouched, they ran along the side of the house, protecting the precious items under their already soaked clothes. Frank's car stopped in front of the main house. He got out hurriedly, protecting himself from the rain with a folder over his head. Without looking sideways, he quickly entered the house. It was their chance. "To the barn," whispered Sarah, changing the plan. "We can't leave Thunder." Linda hesitated. "A horse will slow us down." "I won't go without him," affirmed Sarah, determined. "He's all I have." There was no time for discussion. They ran, crouched to the barn, arriving soaked and breathless. Thunder seemed agitated, as if sensing the danger. "Sarah?" Frank's voice sounded in the distance, coming from the house. "Where are you?" Sarah froze for an instant, then returned to action with renewed energy. She quickly put the saddle on. Thunder, while Linda stored the documents and Claire's box in a leather bag. "He's already noticed something's wrong," whispered Linda. "We don't have much time." Sarah looked around, thinking fast. "Frank's car is blocking the main entrance and your car is visible from the house. He'll see us if we try to leave that way. What about through the fields? Suggested Linda. Is there a secondary road? Yes, the back trail, it leads to the state road, but with this rain... A cry of rage from the house interrupted the conversation. Frank had found something. Perhaps noticed Sarah's absence or realized someone had been in his office. Sarah! The shout echoed, despite the storm. There was no more time for planning. Sarah helped Linda climb onto Thunder, then mounted behind her. Hold on tight, she instructed, guiding the horse to the back exit of the barn. The rain punished them with renewed force when they left for the open field. The mud made the path treacherous, but Thunder was strong and knew the terrain well. They advanced as fast as they could toward the back trail while Frank's shouts became more distant. "He opened the box!" shouted Linda suddenly, having to make herself heard above the noise of the storm. "The safe under the floorboards. He'll know we were there." As confirmation of their fears, they heard the engine of Frank's car roaring. He was going after them. "That way," indicated Sarah, pointing to a patch of dense forest. "The car can't pass, but Thunder can." They deviated from the main path, entering the closed vegetation. The low branches whipped their faces, but it was preferable to the alternative. Behind them they heard the car braking abruptly, followed by the sound of a door slamming violently. "He's going to continue on foot," alerted Linda. Thunder advanced with difficulty through the muddy terrain full of obstacles. The rain had transformed small streams into furious torrents. When they reached one of them, the horse hesitated, neighed, and backed up. "Come on, friend," encouraged Sarah, caressing his wet neck. "You can do it." With a determined neigh, Thunder took impulse and jumped over the stream, landing firmly. On the other side, Sarah's heart leapt with pride and relief. "The road should be just ahead," she said, recognizing the terrain despite the rain that distorted the landscape. A deafening blast made them look back. Frank was closer than they imagined, and he was carrying something. In his hands, a shotgun. "Get down!" shouted Sarah, leaning over Thunder's neck. The horse, as if understanding the danger, accelerated his gallop. The hooves raised mud and water as they advanced through the dense vegetation. Frank shouted something unintelligible behind them, his voice almost swallowed by the storm. Finally, they saw the state road. Thunder burst from the forest onto the wet asphalt at the exact moment a truck was passing. The driver honked in protest, swerving sharply. "Which way?" asked Sarah, pulling the reins to guide Thunder in the right direction. "To town," responded Linda. "We'll be safe there." Thunder galloped along the edge of the road, his hooves finding better support on the grassy shoulder than on the slippery asphalt. Vehicles passed honking, but none stopped to help the two soaked women on a galloping horse in the storm. The sound of an accelerated engine made Sarah look back. Frank's car had found an alternative route and was now advancing on the road, its headlights cutting through the curtain of rain like furious eyes. "He's coming," she alerted. "Back into the woods," shouted Linda. "We can't compete with a car on the road." Sarah pulled the reins, directing Thunder back to the vegetation. The horse promptly obeyed, jumping over the ditch that separated the road from the field. Frank's car passed noisily, advancing a few meters before braking violently and making a U-turn. He had temporarily lost track of them, but wouldn't give up easily. Through the trees, Sarah spotted a construction. It was an old rural church, abandoned, which she knew by sight. With a roof still intact, it offered temporary shelter from the rain. "Over there," she indicated, guiding Thunder toward the improvised sanctuary. They tied the exhausted horse under a side porch and quickly entered the church. The interior was dusty and smelled of mold, but it was dry. Through the broken windows, they observed the road, looking for signs of Frank. "We need a plan," said Linda, shivering with cold in her soaked clothes. "He won't give up easily." Sarah nodded, opening the leather bag where they had stored the documents and Claire's box. "Maybe the answer is here," she suggested, removing the small box. "Let's find out what Frank is so eager to hide." The interior of the old church was illuminated only by the occasional lightning flashes that crossed the broken windows. Sarah opened the small box with trembling hands. Inside, they found a diary similar to Linda's, some photographs and, surprisingly, official documents. "They're property deeds," whispered Linda, examining the papers in the dim light of her cell phone. "For the Mendoza Ranch." Sarah took the documents, confused. "But the ranch belonged to Edward and Frank, inherited from their parents." "No," interrupted Linda, pointing to the name on the document. "It belonged to Claire Miller. She was the true owner." The revelation fell like lightning between them. Sarah quickly leafed through Claire's diary, trying to understand. It says here that she was the daughter of the former owner, Anthony Miller. He sold the property to Edward shortly before he died, but kept half in his daughter's name. Claire didn't know this until she found the documents after her father's passing. And when she discovered, Linda didn't need to complete the sentence. They continued reading Claire's notes. The last entry was dated March 5th, 1999. "Edward is becoming increasingly aggressive after I confronted him about the deed. He says he forged my father's signature, that the ranch is 100% his. Frank acts as if he knows nothing, but his eyes betray him. Linda managed to escape, but I can't follow in her footsteps. They watch me constantly. I'm hiding these documents, in the only hope that someone will find them one day. If something happens to me, know that it was the Mendoza brothers." "My God," whispered Sarah, understanding dawning like a wave. "Frank didn't kill his brother, they were accomplices. And after Edward died, Frank continued keeping the secret, hiding what they did to Claire." "And he found you," completed Linda. "Someone vulnerable, without family, whom he could control completely, while keeping the property that was never legally theirs." A noise from outside startled them. Headlights cut through the stormy darkness, approaching the abandoned church. Frank had found them. "There's no exit through the back," noted Sarah after checking the doors. "We're trapped." Linda quickly stored Claire's documents in her waterproof bag. "These papers are proof of everything. If we can reach town with them—" There was no time to complete the plan. The church door opened violently, pushed by Frank. Soaked, his face contorted with rage, he looked more like a wild animal than a man. In his right hand, the shotgun, in his left, a flashlight that brutally illuminated the faces of the two women. "So this is how it ends." His voice sounded strangely calm, contrasting with his uncontrolled appearance. The traitorous wife and the fugitive sister-in-law, together again to ruin everything. "We know everything, Frank," said Linda, stepping forward, protecting Sarah with her body. "About Claire, about the ranch, about what you and Edward did." A disturbing smile distorted Frank's face. "And what do you plan to do? Nobody will believe you. Two disturbed women, making up stories about a respected citizen like me." He took a step forward. "You tried once before, Linda, and nobody listened. Why would it be different now?" "Because we have proof," intervened Sarah, gathering courage she didn't know she possessed. "The ranch documents, Claire's diary, your own notes." Frank's expression faltered momentarily. "Documents can get lost," he said, raising the shotgun. "People too." Time seemed to freeze in that moment. Sarah saw Frank's finger lightly press the trigger, saw Linda's face harden with determination, felt her own heart hammering against her ribs as if wanting to escape. It was then that the miracle happened. An ear-shattering neigh was followed by the sound of wood splintering. Thunder, somehow having freed himself from his restraints, burst through the side door of the church like a force of nature. His eyes seemed to reflect the lightning, his mane agitated by the wind that entered through the broken windows. Startled by the sudden appearance, Frank turned abruptly, firing the shotgun into the air. The shot hit an already compromised beam of the old roof, triggering a chain reaction. Pieces of wood and tiles began to collapse. Thunder advanced toward Frank, pushing him forcefully against the wall. The impact caused the shotgun to fall from his hands, sliding across the dusty floor of the church. "Come on!" shouted Linda, pulling Sarah by the arm as more pieces of the roof collapsed. Thunder, as if understanding the plan, retreated and positioned himself next to Sarah, allowing both women to mount. Frank, dazed by the impact, was trying to get up when a larger beam gave way, blocking his path to them. With Linda firmly holding the bag with the evidence and Sarah guiding Thunder, the trio escaped through the main door of the church, leaving behind Frank and the continuing collapsing roof. The storm was beginning to abate when they galloped back to the road. The rain, now gentler, washed their faces, like a symbolic baptism for the new beginning that was announcing itself. "Where are we going?" asked Sarah, feeling a strange and intoxicating freedom. "To the police station first," responded Linda, firmly holding the bag with the evidence. "Then to Linda's house. You'll love the other women who live there. They all have stories similar to ours." Sarah nodded, caressing Thunder's wet neck as they galloped down the road. For the first time in 15 years, she felt truly free. The fear was still there like a tenuous shadow, but now there was something stronger occupying her heart: hope. On the horizon, the first lights of the town began to shine. The storm was moving away, leaving behind a sky that was gradually opening. Between the dispersing clouds, a solitary star shone intensely. "Look," pointed Linda, following Sarah's gaze to the sky, "the first star of the night." "The first of many," responded Sarah, a genuine smile illuminating her tired face. The road ahead was long, and the future uncertain. But for the first time in a long time, Sarah didn't feel afraid of the unknown. With Thunder beneath her, Linda at her side, and the truth finally revealed, she was ready to write a new chapter of her story. A chapter of freedom, of healing, of rebirth. As the town approached, Sarah made a silent promise to herself. One day, when she was strong enough, she would return to that road with a letter of her own to hide in the barn of the Mendoza ranch. A letter of hope for the next woman who needed to find her way to freedom. Life, after all, was a cycle, and hers was just beginning.